to another episode of the People's Parliament. My name is Sammy Obeng. Just as you know, the People's Parliament comes your way every Monday from 4 to 5:30 p.m. It's a show that ensures that the legislative arm of government is brought under regular scrutiny. It is the People's Parliament, for which reason Parliament must be accountable to the people. And we are happy that you've been able to join us today. As you're very much aware, you can join this feed live on Facebook, Parliamentary Network Africa. On YouTube, you can also join live, Parliamentary Network Africa. You can follow us on Twitter and continue to send us your comments and your questions at PN Africa Watch, hashtag People's Parliament. My name is Sammy Obeng. Last week, we started to have a conversation around 30 years of Parliament in this fourth Republican dispensation. We had a very beautiful conversation around how Parliament had evolved from the very first Parliament to the 8th Parliament that we currently find ourselves in, so far as this fourth Republican period is concerned. And we had a very lively conversation on how our Parliament has done, how the first Parliament was just about the ruling government's MP without a credible opposition party, to a period now where we have a hung Parliament. How has Parliament been effective in working for the people of Ghana? How has it exercised its responsibilities of overseeing the executive branch, making laws, and representing the people? Today, we'll be evaluating 30 years of parliamentary democracy in Ghana, the opportunities and challenges. And we'll be doing this with two guests who will be sharing perspectives with us. Madame Ketado is Director for Public Affairs of the Parliament of Ghana. She belongs to the committee that is putting together this 30 years celebrations. She'll be sharing perspectives with us, she'll be sharing thoughts with us, but we'll also be looking at how well Parliament has performed over the 30-year period. From a legal person's perspective, a parliamentary watcher's perspective, Benjamin Techi Antiedu is an author, a lawyer who would also be joining us for some discussions around the subject matter. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll move into the conversation the conversation which will be evaluating 30 years of parliamentary democracy in Ghana, the opportunities and the challenges. Don't go away. Welcome back. This is the People's Parliament, brought to you by Parliamentary Network Africa as a weekly broadcast that brings parliamentary accountability to focus. Today we'll be discussing 30 years of the Parliament of Ghana under a fourth Republican dispensation. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? But more importantly, how has our Parliament evolved over the years? And what does it look like for representation of the people going into the future years? Madame Ketado, welcome to the show and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sammy, for having me. As usual, it's my pleasure to be here with you.
And let me congratulate you and the team for an amazing launch of the 30th anniversary sometime last week. I think it was a fantastic activity. Does that signal the kind of celebration we are to witness throughout the year?
Hopefully, yes. I mean, we are very excited that we've had 30 long years of parliamentary democracy. We are hoping that we'll be able to carry the citizens along with us throughout the year and beyond, to ensure that going forward, Parliament is owned by the people. I mean, usually you would look at Parliament and think that it's removed from the Parliament, but from the people. But in the spirit of openness and ensuring that citizens actually own the democracy that we are practicing, we are looking forward to having a very interactive year with the citizenry in general.
Excellent. Talking about interactive year with the citizenry in general, we're going to come back to you to look at what kind of activities are lined up for the anniversary to see whether it's going to be the kinds of activities that will be in the parliamentary enclave only, for which reason we would only have limited access, and the number of people or groups of people who can be able to participate to be limited, or will it be coming down to the people in the various communities, the various constituencies that they find themselves? Mr. Benjamin Techi and Tiedu, welcome also to the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, my brother. Greetings to you and your team. You see that it's always a pleasure to engage.
Very well. As always, we're happy to have you share perspective as a lawyer, an author, and somebody who follows the work of Parliament very closely. The last time we were on this show, we spoke about how the new session of Parliament that is to commence by then, second half of this current 8th Parliament was going to look like, and you share some perspective. This time around, we are not just looking at this 8th Parliament, we are looking at Parliament in retrospect, 30 years of the existence of Parliament within this 4th Republican dispensation. As somebody who has written extensively about Parliament and its work, about reading the law, and have also monitored and worked around issues Parliament, what would be your summary of 30 years of parliamentary democracy in Ghana? How would you sum it all up?
Thank you, Sammy. My work in relation to Parliament has been more of writing articles and position papers regarding Parliament, particularly in respect of decisions that come from the Supreme Court and its impact and effect on the work of Parliament. So if I take a retrospective view of our 4th Parliament, I would say we have been growing. We have a Parliament that has been growing. When the 4th Republic Parliament, when we commenced the 4th Republic, very little was known by Parliament. I recall in the early or late 90s, I started voting somewhere in 2002, 2000, thereabout, early 2000. And I had an encounter with someone about parliamentary votes. And my first reaction was that, oh, for me, I don't care about even who wins the parliamentary seat. All I care for was the president. And seriously, I said so because I had very little or no understanding of Parliament and what it stands for, what it does, and all that. If not, I would have, reversed that statement to say that the crucial one that could touch me closely was that of even the parliamentary candidate or who wins that seat. Because the one big person, the president, will be too remote. But the one who will closely touch me is the MP. So I think that gradually, the people are feeling Parliament. The people are hearing Parliament. They are seeing Parliament, speaking for them. Okay, so Parliament has been growing and becoming more and more meaningful in our governance regime under the 4th Republic. Now people can say, oh, Parliament should do this. When the economy is bad, people are calling on Parliament. So those are suggestive that people have recognized, have come to accept that Parliament is a key player in our governance regime. And I think that is the growth that we all look forward to celebrate, or we have begun celebrating. And that has been espoused strongly by the Speaker. That it's not just about counting the numbers from 1 to 30, but it's the growth. Madam Kate Addo espoused opening our Parliament to the people. And if you look at part of the growth, it has been in the area of reaching out to the people, seeking civic input into every decision that Parliament takes, and making the people part and parcel of Parliament. Because when you are representing someone, the one representing must be in constant touch and in communication with the one that he's representing. or with those that he's representing. So bringing the people very close to parliamentary business has been a major growth point in the Fourth Republic. Now you see our committees. Another point I had occasion to engage you, that you were pushing very hard. I mean, PN Africa pushing very hard for Parliament to reverse its position to hear or to conduct all committee hearing in public. And so what used to, or currently is the practice that, you know, few committees are allowed to hold public sessions unless they seek the permission of leadership or the speaker to do so. And now the default position, as you have successfully canvassed and achieved, is that in the new or in the drafted standing orders of Parliament, that position has been reversed. And now parliamentary committees will be more open, because you look at the whole architecture for our Parliament. People don't have direct access to the chamber. It's at the committees that they have more of unfettered access. You know, on any matter, a member of the public could write to the committee or even seek audience and appear and make, you know, their positions clear on any matter before the committee. And even sometimes there may not even be any matter before the committee at all, but people petition and call Parliament, trigger Parliament to work on matters that affect them. So a major growth point has been working closely with the people.
Right. And on that
Parliament
point,
is becoming increasingly open.
Yes, I was going to say that on that point on Parliament working closely with the people, that is where I switch back to Director for Public Affairs on this whole thing about people thinking, what is really the relevance of Parliament? How important is the Parliament to us? We've had a Parliament that has evolved from 1993 to 2001, the Parliament under the watch of Justice D.F. Annan, the first and second Parliament. Then, of course, we had a third Parliament under the leadership or speakership of the Right Honorable Peter Ala Ajete. Then, of course, we had the fourth Parliament, 2005 through to 2009 January, under the leadership of Right Honorable Virginia Sechi Hughes. And then, of course, we had our first female Speaker of Parliament from January 2009 to 2013 January, the Right Honorable Bamford Addo. Right Honorable Bamford Addo was succeeded by Right Honorable Edward Doa Jao, who served as Speaker of Parliament until January 2017. Of course, 2017 January to 2021 January, we had the Right Honorable Professor Aaron Michael Quay serving as Speaker of Parliament. And now in the 8th Parliament, we have Speaker, 8 speakers, 8 parliaments, 30 years. To what end? How important is Parliament to the ordinary Ghanaian?
7 speakers, because the Right Honorable Justice D.F.
7 speakers, you're right.
Yes, and I must say hello to Ben. I mean, Ben has first become an authority in parliamentary proceedings, and his papers and thoughts on parliamentary procedures and procedures have come to be respected. So well done, Ben, on that score. Parliament, like you indicated earlier, started on a very somber note with just one party, and then it has evolved as we've gone along, and now we have 275 starting with 200 members. Now, what has happened? And the point of Parliament, first of all, is to make laws. So now the lawmaking process has become more interactive, to the extent that citizens are not just sitting on the fence when it comes to legislation. And key examples that come to my mind, the most recent example is the proper sexual rights, proper sexual behavior bill that is currently being worked on. The amount of engagement that the committees that are working on that particular law have had has shown that people are no longer sitting on the fence and deciding and letting a few selected people decide for them what should be contained in the laws and regulations that govern our peoples. As well, the last Friday's incident where there was a misreportage from the Ghanaian Times and the reaction that came from the citizens with regards to a report that Parliament had adopted the Ghana card as the sole registration identification document showed us clearly that now we have a Parliament where we cannot do anything but to engage the citizens in every step that we take, because people are looking at us from all angles and holding us to what we are supposed to do. I must also indicate that the fact that now we have the internet, people are able to access information in real time and watch proceedings, in real time. I've also made it a more interactive, parliament. However, what has been our challenge, one of the challenges that we've had is misconceptions, and these come from a number of reasons. For instance, the fact that our parliament is a hybrid one, which is a combination of the American presidential and the British parliamentary system, meaning that there is an overlap of responsibilities where you have a member of parliament also doubling up as a member of the executive. And so people tend to assume that some of the duties of the executive are actually duties of the legislature. And this has been a point of contention for us, to the extent that people assume that members of parliament should be building roads, should be facilitating education. And as much as we've tried in our various outreach programs to educate people that, look, the executive have their role, the Parliament of Ghana has its role, to the extent that it has oversight over the national pairs, but does not actually expend resources, having a difficult task. As well, you have 275 members of parliament who have access to the media unfitted. These are people who will express their views, sometimes contrary to what actually is the position of the parliament as an institution. All these have contributed to difficulties in engaging citizenry. And so we recognize that we have a lot of challenge when it comes to how we manage citizen interaction. But the good thing is that any interaction is better than no interaction, as Sammy, you'll agree with me. And because of that, we are able to engage citizens more. And like Sammy said, one of the things that is also helping is the fact that very soon committee meetings will be open to the public. And we feel that when citizens get an opportunity to be part of the process that, culminates in decision making, they will have ownership and they will help. That will help in shaping policies and ensuring that our parliament becomes more effective, because then we will be catering to the needs of the citizens as they want, rather than us assuming that they want item A or item B.
On the bit about Parliament being open to citizens, so far as committees are concerned, and I must commend, the institution of Parliament for a great work so far as the plenary is concerned. Some of us have seen how Parliament has evolved from when, for an institution like Parliamentary Network Africa, monitoring sittings of Parliament required us to be physically present in Parliament to see what's going on, to a period where, I could be anywhere and I could still see what's going on in Parliament. We have, simultaneous sign language interpretation. But anytime that we have spoken about this committee matter, and Ben mentioned it, you have also mentioned it, Director, the issue about the revision of the standing orders to allow for committees to be open. Not only are you mentioning this, the leader of the House, leader of government business in Parliament himself, lamented about this particular matter during the opening ceremony of the 30th anniversary. When are we having the standing orders? Because we've been hearing this for far too long. When is it coming?
We are told that work is almost complete on the revision of the standing orders. And so barring any change in plans, I can project that before this year comes to an end, maybe earlier, the new standing orders will come into play. And all these other revisions that we've made to the orders as they exist now will be put in force to ensure that first of all, citizens are more engaged. Secondly, the rules are more suited to what actually pertains in the chamber. And generally, to give Ghanaians a better legislature than we have. I mean, the point of the 30th anniversary celebrations is that we are taking stock of how far we've come. And I've said on other platforms that parliament upon parliament have improved upon previous parliament. So you find that the second parliament was better than the first parliament. The third parliament was better than the second parliament. And the unique thing about this 8th parliament is that I find that we have a lot more in-depth analysis by members of parliament. You have a lot more, and not to say that there weren't educated views, but there's a lot more researched views, and people are, even first-time MPs, are interrogating matters in more depth than we've seen previously. And so once we are able to kickstart the new standing orders, which I'm hoping will be before the end of this year or even earlier, that should help tremendously in ensuring that our parliament is a lot stronger and a lot better than it is at the moment. And we all in parliament are working towards that. After all, the aim of the members and staff is to ensure that our parliament is not only touted as one of the best, but it's actually the best in Africa and probably the world, if we can achieve that.
On this People's Parliament broadcast, you can be rest assured, viewers, and for you, Director, that we would be coming very much at Parliament on this matter of standing orders, because we have heard one too many times from leadership, from speakers after speakers on the need to revise this on work that has commenced. And at least when work commences, at some point, work must truncate, must be completed so that we can see the benefit of it. Because we also believe that matters relating to the revision of the standing orders are important for parliamentary openness, for transparency, accountability, and to encourage more citizens' participation in the work of Parliament. But let's get to the brighter side of things. And I still stay with you, Director Kate. So yes, we know that we have seen Parliament that has improved tremendously so far as infrastructure is concerned. I used to know a Parliament where members of Parliament had their car booths as their offices. Now we have offices for 275 members of Parliament. I was privileged to have done 1 year national service in Parliament and seen how many staffers were put together in small offices. People have more spacious offices. Staff are working day and night to be able to help our Parliament move on. We've seen our growing democracy from 1993 to 1997, the first Parliament where there was no official opposition, to a period now where we have virtually the same numbers from either sides of the House. What would you say, apart from these things, are some of the major highlights of the success story that the Parliament of Ghana can report 30 years into its life?
I couldn't agree with you more on the fact that work needs to come to an end with the standing orders. And the good thing I can report is that the Right Honourable Speaker is also very keen on seeing the matter brought to a close. And so I can assure you that that is work that will come to an end very soon. But in terms of achievement, we've come a long way, like you said, from when we didn't have fiscal infrastructure, where members of Parliament had to work from their car booths, and where members of Parliament could not hold thoughts in discussions for more than 10, 15 minutes. Now you have a Parliament where members of Parliament are thinking on their feet and making very informed discussions on the floor. Now, and it started from probably the 6th Parliament. You can't just come to Parliament with any kind of information and assume that you would not be brought to answer for if you gave wrong information. As well, we have research assistants who are assisting members of Parliament to research into, issues before they come to plenary. Again, you have the Private Members Bill, which has facilitated, laws from private members of Parliament, generating laws, and the proper sexual rights is one of them, and other laws that have, been brought before Parliament as a result of the Private Members Bill, which was initiated by the Right Honorable Michael Quay in the 7th Parliament. Again, you don't have that many women, but if you look at a parliament that started with 16 women in 2000 in the first parliament to 40 women, still very low, only 14% out of the 275 members. It's still something, and these women are contributing to legislation, to deliberation, to oversight, and they are doing an amazing job. Again, you want to look at the committees and how well they are doing. You take a committee like, it's becoming cliched, but that's the truth of the matter. A committee like Public Accounts Committee, you look at the Appointments Committee, you look at Government Assurances Committee, and any committee that has sat in public privileges, and you see the amount of work that go in, you can tell that this is a parliament that is moving from one step onto a higher step. As well, in terms of international engagement, you find that the Parliament of Ghana has become very respected in international circles. So when they attend their meetings at the IPU, CPA, and all the international conferences that the Parliament of Ghana participates in, you find that Ghana is giving premium in terms of opinion, in terms of example. The fact that we are able to work closely, and I'm talking about the two sides of the house, work closely and not let political colors come into play too much, has also been another point of pride for us. And I must mention also that we've had our low moments when we've had near altercations in the chamber, and we are not proud of it. But those have taught us that it's better to jojo than to engage in fisticuffs. And the fact that sometimes members of parliament disagree very, very vociferously, but at the end of the day are able to find common ground, is also another source of pride for us. Again, you spoke about our simultaneous interpretation that has made us reach a group of people that otherwise would have been left out in this beautiful process. We now have physical and virtual access, but we still have a long way to go. And that's why, as we celebrate the 30 years, we are taking stock of the gains that we've been able to make, as well as the challenges that we're facing. And we are not going to be like ostriches and bury our heads in the sand. We are aware of the work that needs to be done. And each and every member of parliament and staff, as well as the leadership and speakership, are putting their shoulders to the wheel to ensure that, we bring parliament closer to the people. We have a parliament that is effective and a parliament that can stand the test of time, so that, when posterity is judging us, it will be judged properly.
Yeah, and beyond the administrative and some of the amazing efforts that have been put in developing parliament, I'm going to come to you, Ben, to also share your major highlights on particularly the legislative positives, the amazing stuff that have happened so far as the technical parliamentary work is concerned. But before I do that, before I come to you, and that's going to be the next for you to share with me your major highlights, because Director Kate mentioned female representation in Parliament, a matter that is of importance to me and of course for us as PN Africa producing this. Just by way of public education, our Parliament has now seen the 8th Parliament, and whereas the number of women in Parliament has increased from the first Parliament right through to the 8th Parliament, it has still not been too encouraging. In the first Parliament, when the chamber was made up of 200 members, only 16 were women MPs. In the second Parliament, we still had a 200-member chamber. Then the number increased from 16 to 19. Then we moved to the third Parliament, by which time the number of representation, members of Parliament were still 200. We had increased the numbers, or we had decreased the numbers from 19 to 18. By the time of the fourth Parliament, 230-member chamber of the fourth Parliament, the female representation grew to only 25, although 30 more seats had been added to Parliament. In the fifth Parliament, 230-member chamber that Parliament also had, the number then decreased to 19 female MPs. That's the fifth Parliament. By the sixth Parliament, we had grown our number from 230 to 275. Yet the number of women in Parliament came to 30. The seventh Parliament, which is the Parliament that died off and ushered in this 8th Parliament, still had 275 members of parliament, only 35 were women. This 8th parliament has the largest number of female MPs, 40 of them, 20 on either side, the MPP side and the NDC side. Yet it is a 275 member chamber. And so that shows the female women dynamics so far as parliament is concerned. But Ben, let me come to you. What are the major highlights for you so far as parliament is concerned? What have been the success stories beyond the administrative, beyond the infrastructure issues, beyond getting parliament closer to the people?
Thank you, my brother. And let me also express my profound gratitude to the Director of Public Affairs for her kind comments about the modest efforts that we make at different fora. So yes, she has mentioned a lot, and whatever I'm going to mention also has been covered by her already. She mentioned the introduction of private members bill. Constitutionally, it has not been contested that Parliament didn't have the power, or members of Parliament didn't have the power to make private members bills. But we all know the impediment, the seeming impediment under Article 108 of the Constitution would suggest that if a bill or a motion will have financial implications, then the presiding officer has the right to object to that. But we all saw the consensual moments when Parliament endorsed that for certain kinds of laws and motions, they will relax the rule. And since that, positive action, was marked, we have seen the birth of some private members' bills. We saw one relating to road traffic laws where fetus were given rights upon which their survivors could actually go to court and seek compensation. And if you, the Director of Public Affairs also mentioned the proper human sexual rights and Ghanaian family values bill, which is also a private members bill. And Sami, if you recall, the first article I did with your input, and I think we did a joint one, I made the strong point that yes, that the window for private members bill will actually allow bills that may not be popular or appealing to the government of the day to be made. And this is a classical example because having a law or a proposed law to deal with such an international matter as homosexuality is something that an incumbent will find it difficult to introduce.
Sorry, Ben, just to interrupt you a bit, if you can increase the pitch of your voice, I think your voice is a bit low for us, and I understand also that we don't have your video feed, but it is fine if you're unable to have that on, but just so that we can hear you more loud, I mean, we can hear you louder and more clear.
Thank you, my brother.
Please go ahead.
I was making the point.
Yes. So you were making the point about private members' bills not being too popular, for the government of the day as one of the things that were envisaged.
Sure. And then we've seen that there's also a private members' bill to decriminalize attempted suicide, for example, with the support of the medical examination that before people get to that point of taking their own lives, they would have reached the level of insanity. And insanity in itself is recognized as, a defense to a criminal liability. So that is a positive thing. Now people can appeal directly through their members of parliament to make law. Now we have the real power to the people, where the people can make the power through their members of parliament. And so that is fantastic. We're hoping that just like in other countries like Kenya, Nigeria, private members bill would even overtake the number of public bills that we pass, because the MPs have wider reach with the people, wider reach on the ground, and they receive, report from the people directly. And they bear the first line of duty to respond and be sensitive to those issues that are brought to their attention. So that's fantastic. One important area, which as a lawyer, I find it so interesting, is how Parliament responds to new directives or position of the law given by the Supreme Court. We find that in some countries, when you practice separation of powers in its true sense, you always have some antagonistic reaction between Parliament and the judiciary. But ours has been very smooth. You'll find that anytime the Supreme Court says, Parliament, here you went off, this is how you should have done it, Parliament re-engineers its own rules and brings in a system that will respect the decision of the Supreme Court. And to me, it's fantastic. And so this is where Parliament contributes directly to good governance. If you recall, in the early 2000s, or let's say around 2012, a classical example of LI 1983, that was the LI that was to establish new electoral areas for our district level elections. And that was the time that the EC brought the instrument, and that Parliament also found that there were so many discrepancies in that document because we needed to itemize all the areas that we covered within a particular electoral area and all that. There were some misplacements here and there. And so Parliament, reached an agreement with the Electoral Commission and made some changes. But that action was challenged by the Supreme Court, that for subsidiary legislations like a constitutional instrument, Parliament has no power to amend it. Just when the decision came, Parliament had a crucial meeting with the Attorney General's office and now decided that for every subsidiary legislation that is to come to Parliament, there will be a pre-laying hearing or pre-laying consideration where it will be subjected to scrutiny, and then some amendment could be considered, and then it will be finalized and reintroduced or brought for laying in Parliament. And that is exactly what you saw in the CI that was to be introduced by the Electoral Commission to make the Ghana card the sole requirement for voter registration. And let me also commend the Director of Public Affairs for reacting in that positive sense. I have some work ongoing, and this one has brought to bear the push for us to have more literature on the workings of our Parliament so that our people will be more and more informed. If you have media, journalists who are supposed to be on top of their work, or let's say you classify them as part of the literate population, if they can get the procedure wrong, then of course there's much more education to be done. So when it comes to subsidiary legislation, what you saw is part of the pre-laying arrangement that Parliament has secured with the Office of the Attorney General and then our stakeholders, that before those instruments are laid formally for the formal counting to maturity to commence, there would have been an opportunity for Parliament to look closely and exercise its supervisory powers there. And as it was indicated in the publication, Parliament does not pass regulations in its true sense as it does in the case of an Act of Parliament or bills. Here, the law is made by certain individuals, certain authorities. And then the Constitution doesn't want to take the whole power from Parliament. So there's a window for Parliament to reject the regulations. Amendment is foreclosed, and that is why the pre-laying is observed. And then you saw the semblance of that one with the special budget committee having a session with the EC on the CI, the proposed CI. So it is at this end that it to be finalized and then properly introduced into Parliament and lead for the counting to begin. So we should, when we do more of this, then you see that we're having increasingly a number of cases that go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court too must be commended as being very helpful in that regard, because Parliament is a decision point coming from two opposing sides. a lot of arguments, a lot of legal challenges will arise. So definitely the Supreme Court has been the one to absorb and deal with them. And then you'll find the Supreme Court coming in to tell us that, you know, there are two quorum numbers to be established in Parliament. The first one is for Parliament to convene a sitting in a legal sense, in a valid sense. And then the second one is for Parliament to be assembled to take decisions. And these have been clarified. And then the participation or otherwise of a deputy speaker while presiding has also been clarified. Okay, and you see that Parliament will swiftly come in to comply with it. And so the counts go on and on. There have been several.
Yes, Ben, and with this count, yes, Ben, with this count, what I hear you and Director Cates both say is that yes, it's been 30 years of, you know, ups and downs, but certainly we can count some successes. We can count a Parliament that is evolving, a Parliament that is improving on its practices, procedures, systems, rules, and what have you. And these things have come, you know, with practice. We'll be going for a break, but before we do that, and of course, when we come back from the break, we'll be discussing in detail the 30th anniversary, what we are to expect and what have you. But even before we do that, these evolution that you both have cited, you know, the growth in administrative, you know, backbone to Parliament, the improvement in infrastructure, the growth in the quality of laws that gets made, the processes, the procedures, private members' bills, relationship between Parliament, the executive, and the judiciary. All of these things point to the fact that if we keep to this pace and we do even better, we can have a Parliament that will continue to grow, will continue to improve, and Parliament that can be able to serve the people better. When we come back, we'll be discussing the 30th anniversary as launched. What are some of the key activities? To what end are these activities, you know, going to be held? And in the end, how would these contribute to the kind of growth that we all as Ghanaians expect to see in our Parliament? Please do not go away. Welcome back. This is the People's Parliament. The People's Parliament is a weekly broadcast brought to you by Parliamentary Network Africa as a way of bringing our legislative arm to the spotlight, providing public education to citizens on how parliaments work, opportunities to engage, but more importantly, holding Parliament accountable. Today, we've been discussing 30 years of the existence of the Fourth Republican Parliament. What are some of the opportunities? What have been the success story? But also, what have been some of the challenges? This continues from our discussions last week, in the last episode where we were with Honorable Yusuf Hussaini, who walked us through from the first Parliament right through to the current Parliament, what the differences have been, what the pros, cons, strengths, weaknesses of each and every one of these parliaments have been right up till now. And today, we're here with the Director for Public Affairs of the Parliament of Ghana, Madam Kate Addo, who has been sharing with us from a committee member's perspective, so far as the anniversary is concerned, but also from the perspective of the person who speaks for Parliament, what the Parliament has been doing over the years. She's been candid enough in acknowledging that there is still room for improvement, and that together with citizens, we can be able to deliver a Parliament that will be amazing. We also have on our guest list Benjamin Techie-Antiedu, who is a lawyer and an author, one who has written extensively about Parliament and follows, you know, what happens in Parliament. He has also been sharing perspective from a legal person's, you know, point of view on the kinds of evolution that has happened in our Parliament, how our Parliament has grown in lawmaking, how our Parliament has grown in overseeing the executive branch, and how our Parliament has grown in the representational function that it continues to play. Director Kate, so it's going to be a full year of celebration. It was launched last week. The speaker gave us some indications of some of the activities that are expected to be held. But when are we expecting to have a full program lineup to know when exactly each activity will be held? And maybe you may want to walk us through some of these activities that are envisaged?
The timelines are a bit blurred at the moment, but the activities are lined out. And so I can just mention some of them. For the purposes of the year-long celebrations, we're intending to divide the country into 6 main zones, to the extent that each part of the country will feel a presence of the parliamentary body as we tour the nation. And so when we visit the regions or the zones that we intend to visit, we are intending that for the time that we are there, we'll engage with the citizens, have a grand debate where we'll collect views on how they think Parliament should function, what their understanding of the institution of Parliament is, what their expectations of the institution is, and then try to demystify the institution of Parliament to them while we interact with them on that level. As well, we are intending to have mock parliaments in the various zones. The good thing is that because of our citizen engagement programs, which has led to the formation of parliamentary youth clubs in almost all the tertiary institutions in the country, we have access to students who are student parliamentarians and who can enact some parliamentary activity. That is something that we are looking forward to, because we believe that when the citizenry are, caught at a very young age and they get interested in Parliament, it becomes easier for us to navigate than when you try to talk to the older citizens who will be set in their ways. Also, because we are trying to engage with citizens and we are trying to demystify Parliament, we'll have other activities that are not so hard, like sporting activities, like church activities or religious activities, cultural activities that will enact Parliament, that will enable members of Parliament to interact with the citizenry at the various zones. When we've done all these things, we intend to come back to Accra and have the national event where we'll have the seminar lectures as well, where members of, the former speakers will get the opportunity to address, seminars and speak about what their views are on Parliament. As well, we're intending to have one mock Parliament, which will be overseen by a former speaker and which will be made up of former members of Parliament, and they will discuss issues of national interest. But of course, it will be a mock Parliament. Then we are intending to have an award ceremony where those who have contributed to the parliamentary journey will be honored. So civil society will be part of it, citizens will be part of it, members of Parliament, groups, and all those people will form part of the various categories that will be recognized at that event. We intend to end the year-long celebration with a Muslim Thanksgiving and a Christian Thanksgiving at the end of the day. And so we are hoping, the key point for us in all these is to ensure that each and every Ghanaian, who is so minded, feels a part of the parliamentary journey. Because really and truly, Parliament has been touted as the one arm of government that has direct representational, position in terms of how we relate to the citizens. You find that members of Parliament who get elected directly by constituents have a direct, connection with them as against the executive, which is slightly removed from the general populace. And so basically, those are the things that we are looking at, undertaking during the year-long celebrations. As I indicated, it's still work in progress, and we're trying to fine-tune everything. But we are intending to have a very engaging year with the citizenry. Also keeping in view the fact that we are very, very cautious of maintaining our position as the first parliament in Sub-Saharan Africa to have an open parliament. We're taking that very seriously. So in all the things we are doing, we are making sure that the citizens are properly engaged, that we are keeping a truly open parliament. And that means more media engagement. And that is why we found what happened on Thursday, which lawyer Antiedu made reference to, very unfortunate, with the misreportage in the Ghanaian Times. The plan is to get members of a press corps that are knowledgeable in the parliamentary processes and procedures, to the extent that when they relay information from Parliament, it will be information that is right, that is accurate, and that is timely. And so we also intend to engage more with the media. And we are intending In fact, we have actually resuscitated programs that we used to do in the past. And tomorrow, for instance, we are recording an edition of Speaker in His Own Words, which Sammy, you have been part of in the past. And then we will also resuscitate our tree program, Rashe Bidjem, and then Parliament in Its Own Words. And all these are aimed at educating citizens, and people like Benantedu and others like him have contributed because they understand how Parliament functions to, the knowledge building capacity or the knowledge building endeavors in Parliament. And we're expecting that more attention will be paid to people like that, and more engagements will be had with them to ensure that they help in the process of engaging citizens and making sure that each and everybody is carried along, on the journey, because we're expecting that next year, when we go to the polls and people select members of Parliament, they will make more informed choices than in the last elections. And for us, that is key. And it's one of the things that we are looking forward to achieving as we celebrate the year-long celebrations. We are hoping for papers, we are hoping for comments, we are hoping for, anything that anybody has that will enhance the work of Parliament. And so we are inviting, contributions from the general populace to the work of Parliament, and to making sure that we enhance our engagement with everybody.
Well, and for us in civil society, we are very interested in this, 30th anniversary celebrations. You can be rest assured, and I say this because I'm very deeply rooted in the Ghana Parliamentary Monitoring Organizations networks, a network of civil society organizations that engage with Parliament, on how we really look forward to being a part of this and to seeing an anniversary that is a marked improvement from what we saw during the 25th anniversary 5 years ago. But the speaker, in delivering his remarks before the launch of the event, says that this will be funded through a funding model that is relying on your strategic partnerships, Parliament's strategic partnerships. And that's, both the legacy projects, the activities and what have you, especially the legacy projects, will not come out of public money. When citizens hear these things coming out of the speaker, at the launch of an important activity such as this, what exactly did he mean?
The speaker has been very vociferous about, guarding the public purse. And, he just doesn't say it, but he tries to also, match his actions with his words. And so he's been very clear on how and what sources should, fund these activities. And, it's been very clear that, look, for a country that is in dire straits at the moment in terms of finances, it will be unfair to further burden the national purse with things that we could source from other sources. And because of that, we are having meetings with relevant funding agencies to see what we can do to raise funds for some of these activities. So you're talking about legacy projects like the restructuring of the ceremonial gate to make it more appropriate for a parliamentary edifice, because we attend conferences in other parts of the world, and we see what they do with things like edifices like a parliament. And people would say that, why would you want to enhance it? But you see, a parliamentary edifice is something that is also of cultural importance and a source of national pride. And there's a need to sort of, elevate all the structures if you can. And that's why speaker after speaker from the 5th Parliament have contributed to ensuring that infrastructure is brought, to a certain standard. And that's one of the things that Speaker Bagbin is very keen on. He's also very keen on ensuring that while we celebrate and go to the regions, we don't burden the taxpayer too much with our expenses. And for that purpose, first of all, that's why we are not going to region by region, and rather going to the zones and ensuring that everybody gets a feel of it in terms of participation, but we're not touching every single region. It's all because we're trying to cut cost. And so citizens can be rest assured that as much as possible, Parliament is not going to burden the taxpayer with our activities, with the expenses of our activities as we go about the year.
That's refreshing to note. And, I particularly thought that was an interesting point that the speaker made, because we've seen in this country times when celebrations have been held, the executive branch has been a culprit many times, and we've seen how there's been wanton dissipation of public funds in the name of celebrating and marking an anniversary. And so yes, as part of parliamentary accountability, we are very sure that the institution of parliament that oversees the executive branch so far as prudent management of public funds is concerned would also be prudent in these celebrations, and more importantly, will be transparent also in how these celebrations go, what kinds of resources went into it, and how the resources were actually expended. I'll come back to you, Director Kate, but Ben, in the various speeches or remarks that were given by the majority leader, minority leader, and the speaker, some very interesting constitutional, matters came up. And then also matters relating to the overall functions of Parliament and the kinds of support that Parliament will need. And I will need your comments on some of these matters. The minority leader, for example, requested a collaboration with civil society as the best way to be able to hold governments accountable. The majority leader, on his part, asked for a new constitutional order, and he cited many instances or examples of what this new constitutional order would mean. He pointed to matters relating to Parliament becoming more gender sensitive, increased making sure that we cap the increasing of seats in Parliament, matters relating to Speaker being a member of Parliament, and what have you. But more importantly, he spoke to us, what he termed as a new constitutional order. The Speaker of Parliament, also in his presentation, was quite worried about the monetization of politics and also the need for accountability as one of the biggest ways to sustain our democracy. He cited the example of how when in this country you send somebody to go buy something for you and you request your change from that individual, the individual finds it to be problematic because nobody wants to account, right? From the little child that you have sent to the government, institution or the public office holder. What do you make of these fundamental issues that these leaders raised? Civil society collaboration, a new constitutional order, accountability as a backbone for the democracy that we want to continue to enjoy, and monetization of politics.
Thank you very much.
Especially coming up on a platform as important as this, these leaders raising such important issues. What does it bring to mind?
Yes, quite commendable. And these are the practitioners. If you look at the speaker, the speaker has been, maybe to put it crudely, the founding member of our fourth Republican Parliament and has kept it up by being even the speaker. So, and then the majority leader also follows him up from 97 Parliament, to date. So these are people who have worked at Parliament. And so if they are talking about structural challenges and how we can surmount them, then you have little to even question them about, except for them to give further explanations to some of the requests or the proposals they are making. For example, the majority leader asking or requesting that part of the new constitutional order will have a Speaker of Parliament who is also a member of Parliament. For that, I have been searching in my mind and experience as to the kind of benefit we're seeking to get from that. On that
particular point, he espoused the fact that Ghana is among the only, I think, 9 countries in the world that do not have their Speaker of Parliament being a member of Parliament. It's an information that we would want to independently verify as PR Africa do, but if that is so, is that not profound?
That is profound, but for me, I want to interrogate everything. So yes, if everybody is doing it, doesn't mean it's good for us. You have to convince me what is it that a certain member of Parliament who doubles as a Speaker of Parliament will bring to bear additionally. That is the interrogation that needs to be told or need to be inquired into, that there will be a particular benefit or enhancement of our system when we have such a regime. We have made a clear departure, or we have made an arrangement to blend the two systems, as the Director of Public Affairs indicated earlier, that we blended the UK's parliamentary system with the American presidential system. And that is the hybrid position that we have coined for ourselves. And even see that members of parliament becoming ministers have been challenged as not even being good for us. So if you are asking for a further deepening of such hybrid, then it may be a little questioning. So to me, the departure is clear, that members of parliament should be members of parliament only. Then we have members of the executive. And as we have repeated over and over again, the main work of parliament, besides lawmaking, is oversight. And you cannot exercise effective oversight if you are participating on the ground that you are overseeing. Okay, so it's clear, but largely, I concur with all the proposals that came, seeking to make parliament more accountable to the people. Fantastic, because how can you represent someone without giving bullet to bullet how you have been exercising that power? Monetization of our politics, that is the basis of corruption that we see in our public institutions. Before somebody comes out to become a member of parliament, look at the money that has to go down the drain, be paid fiscally to people. Nobody will want to admit that, but we see them. Sometimes in elections, you see money packed on tables. These are not stories. You know, even when it comes to even what do we even call it? Approval of DCs and things like that. Remember, there was a case that was referred to the Office of the Special Prosecutor. You see some of these things, and if you don't have a means, or we don't have a model to avoid the trappings of corruption through the electioneering system, then whatever product you have will not be. We've had issues of attendance in parliament, and most of the stories you hear are that when they sit here, they cannot use their salaries to do the kind of payment or to meet the demands from their constituencies. They have to look for further sources. And these are all disturbing the kind of parliament that we must have. And so, yes, we should take them very, very, very seriously and work them out in every opportunity that they may have. As for having a new constitution, that has been debated widely, and I belong to the school of thought that we don't need an entirely new constitution, because systems have been built out of the current constitution. So when you change that system entirely, you will disturb the foundation, and it will be more expensive and may not yield the needed results. So yes, we need structural changes. Most of the things Parliament has been able to find a way to redesign its systems and cope. But there are others that are constitutional or that are structural in nature, and you need to change the system, the structure to respond to those. And I think that those are the areas that they have espoused. But, having a full separation between Parliament and the executive is key. Some have even challenged the existence of the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. That is an abridgment. It's an aberration of the concept of separation of powers. Yes, the three arms must exist independently, but that is not to say that they don't work together. They all work together. I cited the examples of the Supreme Court, the judiciary, even directing the constitutional power of Parliament from time to time, and Parliament falls in line. A lot of business are done through Parliament by the executive, and they have gone through. So if you remove that layer, let's even remove that layer and try it and see if different results will come. If not, we will know which other part to touch. But these are very, very fundamental issues that we must look at again and again and again. Even when it comes to subsidiary legislation, I've said that the constitutional arrangement for passing the where it's laid for 21 sitting days and it become law if Parliament does not annul it within that 21 sitting days. That is a too short a procedure, too narrow for full participation of the public. Subsidiary legislation touch people more directly. These are the operational rules that must support the general framework contained in the Constitution and Act of Parliament for us to have full constitutional system or to have full effect and implementation of laws. So if this is not open, we'll have a problem. Just look at the proposal by the EC to make the Ghana card the only requirement for registration. If that happens, how many people will be able to vote when the arrangement for securing the Ghana card has not been firm? Okay, right. So these are rules that if it's not subjected to a broader window for people to come in, then you are going to pass the laws or subsidiary legislations will come into force, but you cannot enforce them. Remember the towing levy that was achieved under the road traffic regulations. It has been in the law, but we have not been able to implement it. Talk about Okada using motor cycles for commercial purpose. It's illegal under the road traffic regulations 2012, but don't we see them operating even sometimes in front of the High Court complex?
And some of them sometimes come as far as parking in front of Parliament House itself. But and I agree with you that public participation is of extreme importance, on matters around subsidiary legislation. It's pretty opaque when it comes to public participation in that particular area. Even matters, we find ourselves in a debt crisis at the moment. Matters relating to approval of some of these loans and other facilities when it comes to Parliament, the extent of public participation in these things, unlike the extensive public participation that we see with bills becoming laws. But Director Kate, when you hear your minority leader talk about collaboration with civil society, when you hear the majority leader lament and brood about the Constitution and its defects and calling for a new constitutional order, when you hear the Speaker of Parliament crying over monetization of politics and the lack of accountability in our democracy, some people have maintained that instead of these members of Parliament fixing the problems, using the power that they have to solve the problems, they join us on radio, on television, and on such platforms to also lament and brood about these matters. What do you say to people like that? And how are we looking at using, the anniversary, for example, to help address the teething problems that the people of Ghana keep facing?
The issues are a whole myriad, and Ben really did touch on most of them. The one that I'm most interested in is the conversation about the strict separation of powers, and I've heard conversations for and against, and it's something that I'm very interested in. So hopefully I'll get to engage Ben on that conversation and see where we go with that. But in terms of whether members of Parliament Speaker can use their powers to effect the changes that they sort of also seek to see as we also do as citizens, I think we all know that this is a numbers game, and members of Parliament alone cannot effect constitutional change. When we had the review of the Constitution, there were things that we were expecting to see that we didn't see. And from that time, somebody like the Honorable Osei Mensah Bonsu has been speaking about what he was hoping to see, happen to the Constitution. He has been advocating for, a total restructuring of the Constitution. But like Ben said, it's not just a simple matter of restructuring. A lot has to go into that. Even if, for example, we are to have strict separation of powers, what does that mean to the structures that we've built on, for which we've gained international recognition. What does that mean? Are we going to regenerate everything? Some people say that I have become stuck in my ways and I don't want change. But when I look at, something like a parliamentary democracy is something that is traditional, that is steeped in old processes and procedures. The change that we seek, to what extent will they affect positively what we already have? But that's not to belittle the need for, the call for changes that people are asking for. I think everything has to be in perspective. And that's why one of the key things that we're seeking to do during this year is to engage civil society, engage the media, and engage the ordinary Ghanaian on what they perceive to be the best form of legislature that they want. Once we are able to have an idea of what direction Ghanaians want us to go, then we can look at the realities of our current situation, and then proper conversations can be had at the proper fora to see what can be done to effect some of the changes that are being sought. At the end of the day, the standing orders review has taken so long, and you rightly mentioned that it has to come to an end. If that is able to come to a successful end and we see a new standing order in operation, that will mean a new dawn for us. And once we have that, then we can consider other issues that come up. In terms of monetization, we have spoken about it time and again. We've spoken to citizens that when members of parliament or potential members of parliament come to you and give you certain promises, you should know that those promises cannot be fulfilled because it's not possible. They don't have the wherewithal to do all the things that they claim they can do. If we have a citizen that is, that is aware that, look, these are things that members of parliament can do. These are things that members of parliament cannot do by virtue of their positions. It will help. And that is what brings into perspective the fact that there still remains a lot of work for us in parliament to do in terms of citizen engagement and education, and we accept that. And we are hoping that in the years to come, from now on, we'll be able to have some impact. And what has been happening in the past is that we take 2 steps forward and probably 3 steps back in that direction because we have so many people speaking at the same time. Now that we have decided that we're making a conscious effort to change the narrative about parliament and how it functions and what we should expect and what we shouldn't expect, and looking at what can work for us and what cannot work for us. I think that now that we've made up our minds to do that, we'll be able to achieve something in that direction. It all lies in the willpower. And I'm sure that now we are prepared to do that. And so with God on our side, the universe looking after us, something good should come out of all this.
We've had such an informative discussion with Kate Addo, Director of Public Affairs of the Parliament of Ghana, and Benjamin Techian, the author, lawyer, who has followed Parliament and its work extensively. We've had such an informative conversation, such an amazing conversation with them, so much so that we are almost at the tail end of our 90 minutes time allotted for this broadcast. We want to apologize to our viewers that today we are unable to bring you last week in Parliament as well as this week in Parliament, which are 2 important features of our weekly broadcast because of the lack of time. We assure you that next week when we come your way, we will be able to let you in on what's happening in Parliament, the week before, and of course, give you a peek into what's expected to happen in Parliament in that coming week. We are unable to do that today because we have run out of time, but we'll take the closing words from our guests. I'll start with you, Ben. We've been discussing 30 years of parliamentary democracy in Ghana and all the issues that comes with it. What will be your parting words?
Yes, thank you. And it has been another refreshing session, an opportunity to educate the public on our parliament and how it functions and some of the progressive things and where there are gaps. So it's been great. Our parliament has been evolving, restructuring itself to meet the increasing demands on it. And many has been shared. Madam Kate has been fantastic, alluding to some of the gains we've made so far. And then we all collectively acknowledge the difficulties that surround us, especially those that are structural. and built within the constitutional framework that they are using for now. So we hope for a better parliament, and we also encourage you to continue the yeoman's job that you're doing, to keep our citizens constantly educated on parliamentary affairs. And together, we hope to build a more formidable and a nation that we can all be proud of.
Director Kate, what would be your parting words?
Yeah, I'll leave it to you now.
As I usually say, Parliament is a house of representation. Each and every member of Parliament is an employee of the citizens. The time has come for citizens to take their rightful place of pride in the parliamentary journey. Contribute to discussions. When we ask for memos, please contribute. When you feel like coming to Parliament, please come to Parliament, observe proceedings. When you're coming, observe the rules that govern, attendance upon the House. You cannot be in party colors. You cannot be in colors for demonstration. You can't carry weapons that are offensive. But generally, we encourage more and more people to interact with the Parliament of Ghana, either virtually or physically, for them to have an understanding of how Parliament actually functions. Would also like to encourage people to interact with us online. But while we're doing that, we also seek that members of the public who do that will be decorous in their language. Together, we can build a beautiful legislature and a beautiful country. We hope that when we come to the regions, we'll be able to touch as many people as possible so that next year, when we look back on how the 30th anniversary went, we'll have something to say. And that will be the fact that each and every member of the public got a feel of how our parliament actually functions. Adesami, thank you for the opportunity. And Ben, thank you. I think we should continue this conversation later.
Very well. And, I want to close this by adapting or paraphrasing a quote from John Pine. John Pine is considered as one of the founders of parliamentary democracy in the UK. And to paraphrase his quote, he says, Parliament is that to, and in this case, he used the Commonwealth, but in this case, our country. Parliament is that to Ghana, which the soul is to the body. It behoves us, therefore, to keep the facility of that soul from distemper. If the soul of our country would function effectively, it hovers around that fulcrum that holds it together, the Parliament of Ghana. And we all have a responsibility to keep that soul from distemper. It is the reason why we do what we do here at Parliamentary Network Africa, providing public education on how Parliament works, opportunities to engage, but more importantly, holding the institution of Parliament accountable. We thank you very, very much for the opportunity to join us today, our guests, our viewers, and the team here at PN Africa who have made this possible. We'll come your way same time next week with another episode of the People's Parliament. My name is Samuel Obeng. Do well to follow us on our respective platforms for more of these on Facebook, Parliamentary Network Africa, on YouTube, Parliamentary Network Africa, and on Twitter at PN Africa Watch. Enjoy the rest of your evening and see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the People's Parliament, the weekly parliamentary accountability broadcast brought to you by Parliamentary Network Africa as part of our parliamentary accountability program. And as you're already aware, Parliamentary Network Africa is that civil society parliamentary monitoring organization that follows up on ensuring that parliaments across our continent remain open. By parliaments being open, we mean we are looking at parliaments that are transparent, accountable, and parliaments that encourage citizens' participation in their work. My name is Samuel Obeng, and I'm happy once again to join you for today's episode of the People's Parliament. In this weekly parliamentary broadcast, we hold Parliament accountable. Today, we are going to have another conversation, that seeks to bring the work of Parliament to the spotlight in such a way that allows us to assess 30 years of the Fourth Republican Parliament. How effective has it been? in living to its mandate of ensuring that it is legislating, ensuring that it is overseeing the executive branch of government, of course, representing the people of Ghana. In January of 1993, the Fourth Republican Parliament, the first Parliament of the Fourth Republic, started its work, and we have gone through 4 years of the tenure of each parliament, and we are now in the span of the 8th Parliament. 8 parliaments have been constituted, assembled. They have worked in different ways and forms to represent the people of Ghana. And now it has been 30 years. How effective has Parliament been 30 years down the line? That will be the center of our conversation today. And I'll be very soon introducing to you the guest who will be joining us for today's conversation on 30 years of Parliament of Ghana in this Fourth Republic. Remember also that beyond our conversation, which is focusing on 30 years of the Parliament of Ghana in the Fourth Republic, we'll also bringing you the segment on last week in Parliament, and then we'll also give you a preview of what is to happen in Parliament this week. All of these are part of our, drive to ensure that we are bringing quality public education, citizens awareness to the issues going on in Parliament. Remember that you can join us as always on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, Parliamentary Network Africa. And then of course on Twitter, you can tweet at us at PN Africa Watch. When we come back from the short break that will be going on very soon, I'll be introducing to you the guests who are going to be joining us for today's show. We have one member of Parliament or immediate past member of Parliament. We have a member of staff from Parliament, and then also we have a journalist who has covered the parliamentary beat for many, many years. I'll introduce to you these guests when we come back from this quick break, and then we get the conversation going. My name is Samuel Obeng, and we are watching the People's Parliament. Our consent, Honorable. To represent the people of Ghana, and now it has been 30 years. How effective has Parliament been 30 years down the line? That will be the center of Ghana in this, and then Network Africa, and then of course on Twitter, you can tweet at us at PN Africa Watch. When we come, so we will start with you, Honorable Mr. Fuseini. How is it? How is life like outside of the chambers of Parliament?
Well, life has been good. Samuel Obeng, and always wonderful talking to you. I appreciate and admire the dedication, commitment, and effort you put into these activities, the activities of Parliament, and I think that it's only good that I commend your effort all these years. Hear me.
It appears I am having a challenge with being able to hear the Honorable Member of Parliament when the former Honorable Member of Parliament, when he speaks. We are working the lines, but yes, my question was to find out from you how it has been like outside of the chambers of Parliament, and I certainly would want to hear your perspectives on that. We'll be coming back to you once this is rectified. Remember that this is the People's Parliament, a weekly broadcast brought to you by Parliamentary Network Africa as part of our public good efforts of bringing parliamentary education to the people, but also holding the institution of Parliament accountable. We have maintained consistency that usually accountability efforts had been channeled had been directed at the executive branch of government, only. But with parliament being a co-equal branch of government, which has the responsibility of overseeing the executive branch, somebody asks a big question: who watches the watchdog, or who watches the watchman? So how do we ensure that parliament is actually living up to the expectation, so it is serving us well, for us to be able to benefit from what parliament is meant to work on? So, Honorable Hussaini, now I think we can hear you live and clear. How is life
Can you
like,
hear me?
not being a member of parliament?
Well, life has been good. I'm into the next chapter of my life. I am into farming. I'm also once a while doing consultancy for people. I'm also interested in ensuring that our democracy survives and making parliament really the citadel of democracy in this country. I mean, we have always said that you can have a government without parliament. You can have a democracy without parliament. But you can have, you can have a government without parliament, but you can have a democracy without parliament. I mean, is the people's representatives. I mean, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, it's actually a government by the people, for the people, and of the people. And so parliament is so critical in ensuring that the democratic credentials of this country is enhanced. So an effective parliament in that direction will do a lot of good to our project, our democratic projects that we are pursuing.
And nicely put. And certainly that is a good start or introduction to our conversation today. So the Parliament of Ghana has lived 30 years. The Parliament of the Fourth Republic has lived 30 years. Has it really lived up to the people's expectation?
Well, there have been ups and downs. I remember in the first Parliament of the Republic, Fourth Republic, the general refrain was that Parliament was a rubber stamp. Even though that refrain is still there, it is of a lesser intensity. This is largely because in the first Parliament of the Republic, you do not have an effective opposition. And so the opposition that was operating outside Parliament always said that the Parliament approved of all policies, bills that were brought by the executive of Parliament. So, I mean, the general refrain was that Parliament was a rubber stamp. And you can see clearly one example that I cite in the passage of the Corson financial laws, the law on Corson financial laws. Because we did not have the inputs of the opposition in fashioning out a legal regime that will meet the reasonable and legitimate expectations of all Ghanaians. That law still exists, but now has been weaponized. This is because we did not have, I mean, the rich experience of opposition criticizing or critiquing, suggesting the provisions, amendments to provisions of the law that would meet the expectations of Ghanaians. We also had the problem of Parliament in the second also of Parliament, still under Jerry John Rawlings. You could see clearly that even though there was the minority, at that time there were just 68 or so members of Parliament. And so the opposition, even though effective, was not very strong. I mean, and we've built upon that. Now, when we got the Bagbin's minority bench, there was a marked improvement on the opposition to government, and the contribution of Parliament to the general welfare and people of this country could be felt. I mean, people loved at that time, during the time of the minority leader Bagbin, people loved to listen to Bagbin. And at that time, they were very good members of parliament. You remember Felix Ajapon, the majority leader then, who took time to explain. At that time, there was the Venerable J.H. Mensah, who would stand on his feet and debate. I mean, I met Nana Addo Akufo-Addo, the president of the Republican Parliament. On the opposition side, you have Ben Kumbo. I mean, very solid on his feet. You had many members. I mean, at one point in time, you had Victor Behu, Ghana's former foreign minister in parliament. So you could see clearly that at that time, parliament rose up to the challenge, and the MPP government under Kufuor was always under the spotlight. In the Mills Mahama government, parliament continued to do well, to do good. And because parliament has been improving, people expected that when the people of Ghana finally decided that they want to give equal representation to the political parties in parliament to be able to push the frontiers of accountability and transparency forward, they gave them 137, and
we are looking at 30 years of the Fourth Republican Parliament, you know, from 1993 to January 2007 was the first parliament of the Fourth Republic. And of course, from January 1997 to January 2001 was the second parliament. Then we moved on to the third parliament from January 2001 to January 2005, the third parliament. Then, of course, the fourth parliament, January 2005 to January 2009. Fifth parliament, January 2009 to January 2013. Sixth parliament, January 2013 to January 2017. Seventh parliament started in January 2017 to January 2021. And of course, from 2021, we have had the eighth parliament. The eighth parliament has done 2 sessions, 2 years, half of its lifespan so far. And so it even gives us a good time to be able to assess them, whether this eighth parliament, how it has been touted, has lived up to its expectation. And so, Honorable, you made that profound point about how you think that the first parliament, in fact, not your thinking, it was so. The first parliament lacked an effective opposition. And because of that, you know, it is one of those parliaments that certainly could not live up to the mandate that it could probably live up to. We'll be coming to the second parliament. Of course, in the second parliament, you gave a few pointers on how now with the opposition in parliament, in the second term of President Rawlings, with the likes of J.H. Mensah facing off with the likes of J.H. Owusu Ansah, I think, you know, with the likes of current president of the Republic and co, you know, on their feet and debating issues, it made the second parliament a marked difference, you know, from the first parliament, certainly, because now it was a parliament that had opposition. It was a parliament that had the ruling party's people and what have you. We'll be coming to now when parliament transitioned, you know, from President Rawlings's era to former President Kufuor's, you know, era. Obviously, we had entered into the new millennium. Different things happened, you know. It was quite different significantly from the other things. But before I come back to you, Honorable, now I would want to welcome the Director for Public Affairs of the Parliament of Ghana, Madam Kate Addo, who has also joined us as one of the guests to speak about 30 years of the Parliament of Ghana. Once I have her video feed, we'll cross over to her to also check out her thoughts, particularly about the first and second parliament in respect of the views that Honorable Yusuf Hussaini, you know, has shared. But let's still stick a little bit with the first and second parliament, Honorable Minister Hussaini. Now, this was a period where the government itself had transitioned from military rule to now, a democratically elected president, democratically elected parliament. The Consultative Assembly to work on parliament had done their work. Parliament had started. There were just a few of the members of that first Republican parliament, the first parliament of this republic, who were in previous parliaments, like the third Republican parliament and what have you. So these are relatively new people learning the ropes, trying to make laws, trying to oversee the executive branch. And of course, the executive branch at that time was a former military government. What was the effectiveness of oversight of the Parliament of Ghana around that time? A parliament that did not have an effective opposition. That's the first parliament. And then also the second parliament, it had an effective opposition, but this is a government of a former military, ruler. How effective was parliament, in your opinion, around these times?
So, like I said earlier, the first parliament. Tell me, can you hear me?
You can go ahead, sir.
So good.
Yes,
you had the second parliament that had opposition, but the dominant effect of the military ruler and constitutional president was still prevalent. I mean, you could see clearly. And then the NDC had overwhelming majority, over 200 of the 200 member parliament. NDC and the NCP had about 130 something seats in parliament. The MPP had 69 members in parliament. And so clearly, again, because of the overbearing influence of Rawlings and the numerical strength of the NDC in parliament, there was opposition like Dr. Obed Asamoah used to say that opposition will have their say and then the majority will have their way. Because you could see clearly that they could not defeat any motion on the floor of the House. And so, yes, there was marked improvement. There was democracy. Look at the attempts at bringing issues to Parliament for debate. The Abacha issue and many other issues came up for debate. The fashioning of parliamentary practice took the center stage in the second parliament. People were forced to learn parliamentary practice and to be able to debate matters on the floor and of the House without recourse to passions, emotions, and all those things. And so clearly, there was a marked improvement in the second parliament, even though you still have the dominant feature and character of Rawlings and the weaker opposition in terms of numerical strength.
Remember that if you've just joined us, you're watching the People's Parliament. The People's Parliament is a weekly parliamentary accountability broadcast brought to you by Parliamentary Network Africa as part of our citizens education efforts and also as part of holding Parliament accountable. We maintain that the legislature, just like the executive branch, must certainly be accountable for its actions and inactions and accountable to the people that it served. If you missed out, you certainly have missed out on a few analyses by the former member of parliament for Tamale Central, who had analyzed the first and second parliaments of this republic. And this is the period spanning from 1993 to the end of 2000, when elections were held again. And then that ushered in the third parliament. The third parliament was quite different. This is a time when President Rawlings had done his 8 years. He had honorably, acknowledged that the Constitution 1992 only allows for 8 years. And so he does not contest the elections. The NPP party puts up His Excellency John Agyekum Kufuor. The NDC party puts up former Vice President and who later became a former president, the late John Evans Atta Mills. Elections were held, and now NPP has the executive president, but they also get a majority of seats in the third Republican parliament. It was a different kind of parliament. But before we go into how different that was, at least we can credit the first and second parliaments for some amazing lawmaking, efforts that they had to put in. They kicked us off in making some laws, passing a couple of bills, especially for two initial parliaments that did not have the experience of how parliament has worked in, some of the earlier republics. But then came the parliament during the first term of President Kufuor, the third Republican parliament, the third parliament of the Fourth Republic. Is there anything significant that you remember about this particular third parliament, Honorable Minister Husseini?
Obviously, the third parliament was unlike the first parliament or the second parliament. The third parliament, the NDC now had former ministers in parliament. The NDC had gained experience in governance. The NDC had appreciated how a country is run. The NDC had produced a record. The MPP had members of parliament who were ministers so many years ago, who had a shot at governance, and who were using their experience to bamboozle the NDC members of parliament who were quite novice at parliamentary democracy. And so in the third parliament, you could see some balance that the members, parliament was now evening up. You had the minority members of parliament, some of whom were former ministers and ambassadors, and then you had the MPP majority who had former ministers in the Third Republic in parliament. And so the new parliamentary practice, the NDC had also honed the craft in parliamentary practice. So you could see that the third parliament was quite interested. If you look at debates in the third parliament, they were unlike debates in the fourth parliament or in the first parliament and second parliament. Because now the parties could hold their own. They had mastered the art of parliamentary democracy, and they were now prepared to practice it.
That's profound. The third parliament, indeed, you described it quite succinctly. This is a time when, for 8 years, some of the members of parliament from the NDC side had served in government, and now they are out of government. They are now supposed to be opposition MPs working with MPs who and ministers and the presidents who are coming from a different political party. And you describe it as being very different from what happened or pertained in the case of the first and second Republican parliament. But President Kufuor served for 8 years. During this 8 years period, of course, Ghana had to go through the HIPC experience. During this 8 years period, there had to be a lot of social interventions, that were introduced by the President Kufuor government. During this 8 years period, the experienced group of NDC members of parliament sought to hold President Kufuor and his government to account. And of course, there came a certain Idris Husseini joining in the ranks in 2006 through a by-elections, if I get that correct. And so you saw the latter part of the fourth parliament that still had President Kufuor as president. And certainly as somebody who was hoping to join the fourth parliament, certainly you had monitored and studied the work from the third parliament extensively. How different was the third and fourth parliament compared? First term of President Kufuor, second term.
Parliament. Sam, go back to the third parliament. Now, because the NDC and the minority had honed the craft of parliamentary practice, the first major scandal that hit President Kufuor was a loan that they were seeking to contract, which documents they presented to Parliament, which address was traced. The address of the lender was traced to a barber shop. Do you remember that?
To a salon, yes.
A salon. So clearly it's because they were able to hone their craft. They knew how to conduct research I mean, they didn't take, I mean, so if we want to say that, I mean, Parliament then became more aggressive in holding the executive to account. Parliament was demanding more transparency. Where is the loan coming from? What are you going to use the loan for? You remember in the fourth Parliament, building upon the experiences of the minority in the third Parliament, the Eurobond and its problems, how the money was assessed, where the money went, and all those things now became a subject matter of debate. President Kufuor himself did not escape scrutiny. Any policy, I mean, privately or personally and politically, as a political office holder. I mean, during the fourth Parliament, there was this debate that we separate the personal lives of public office holders from their political life, because there was the propensity in the third Parliament to shine the light, the spotlight on political office holders and question their integrity and morality in the fourth Parliament. There's a distinctive feature of the fourth Parliament. Part of the accountability and transparency drive in that Parliament extended to matters which clearly attracted the concern of some political observers. And there was now the argument.
As a former minister, former member of parliament, you know, a lawyer par excellence, what is your take though on that issue of whether the personal lives of political office holders, you know, must really be brought to the spotlight apart from their political life and their official lives?
Well, I think that you cannot, can you separate the two? Because high moral turpitude, integrity, and all that are requirements in the Constitution for the purposes of appointing a person into office. A person shall not be a certified bankrupt. A person shall not be convicted of a crime of dishonesty. And so clearly, like Hart said in his treatise, that on the fringes of law is morality. It's morality, and so you will not be able successfully to decouple a person's personal life from his life as a public holder. It's going to be very difficult, and all over the world we've seen that it's really very difficult to do that. And so, but I'm just highlighting what happened in the fourth Parliament. That in the fourth Parliament, the spotlight was so intense on the public office holders that their personal lives became the subject matter of intense debate in Parliament and outside Parliament.
Absolutely. Now, that fourth Parliament had the Right Honorable Bejina Sechi Hughes as the Speaker of Parliament. Before Bejina Sechi Hughes was the good old Peter Alajete.
Yes.
4 years Peter Alajete served from 2001 to 2005. Your own political party, the NDC, at some point when Peter Alajete needed to exit because his party, the NPP, were not putting him up. You know, your party put him up to contest against Bejina Sechi Hughes. Before Peter Alajete was the venerable D.F. Annan, you know, 8 years as Speaker of Parliament. These three speakers, D.F. Annan, Peter Alajete, Bejina Sechi Hughes, your thoughts? And how they also help shaping our parliamentary democracies.
I was quite close to D.F. Annan. I used to visit him in the company of Haruna Idrisu. I mean, he believed in the youth. He thought that the future of NDC lay with the youth. And so he always encouraged us. Sechi Hughes, I watched him from afar. Didn't know Peter Alajete. I was privileged to have known Peter Alajete because he was the father of my boss, Larry Ajete. And so I knew him as my father as well, because my boss's father is my father. So I according him that respect, I met him in court with his baritone voice, and he always believed in that divine instrument given to him by God to prosecute cases. And any time that the divine instrument failed him, he complained bitterly. And so, yes, why did NDC put him up? NDC thought that he was fair in the impartiality, fairness is a key ingredient in the administration of the House, especially on the floor of Parliament. That the minority, even though will have their say, you must make it appear that they are not sidelined in having their say. And the NDC felt that even though Peter Ala Jete had been nominated by President Kufuor to be the speaker, he had accorded equal opportunity and fairness. He had been fair in the administration of the House, such that the minority did not feel that they were hard done by the dictates of the speaker. And that is why when the President Kufuor decided to change him for Virginia Sachi Hughes, the NDC felt they would be better off with the devil they know than the angel they don't know. And that's why they put him up.
And you know, if you just joined us, remember that you are watching the People's Parliament, a weekly broadcast brought to you by Parliamentary Network Africa, which seeks to, you know, bring the institution of Parliament to accountability, holding Parliament accountable. We've been here with Honorable Yunusa Hussaini. We've been discussing the eight parliaments that have assembled since 1993, and he has brought us some very interesting perspective. Now that we have gotten to the fourth parliament, which is halfway, you know, through the period of the Fourth Republican dispensation, maybe this will be the good time to refresh the memories of our viewers on some of the major key actors, you know, during the life of the first, second, third, and fourth parliament. So, like we had mentioned, in the first parliament, the Speaker of Parliament from 1993 to 1997 was Justice Daniel Francis Annan, popularly called DF Annan. Of course, his first deputy speaker was Mohammed Ibn Chambers. Of course, having SB Arthur as the second deputy speaker. Majority leader then, JH Owusu Champon, a very important figure as far as our parliamentary democracy is concerned. He was supported by B.A. Hussaini. I'm not too sure whether that B.A. Hussaini is in any way linked to Yunusa Hussaini, but we'll ask that question later on because they both bear Hussaini. The minority leader then was Owusu Ejekum, and he was supported by Samuel Nyama Donko in the first parliament from 1993 to 1997. Then came 1997 to 2001, the second parliament of the Fourth Republic. Still, Justice Daniel Francis Annan, DF Annan, as Speaker of Parliament. Kenneth Jirasa was first deputy speaker of Parliament. Of course, we had Freddie Blay as the second deputy speaker of Parliament then. Kwabena Eje, then, of course, majority leader, later replaced by JH Owusu Champon as majority leader. Deputy majority leader, M.A. Seidu. Minority leader then J.H. Mensah. So that was a parliament where the two JHs, you know, would stand on their feet and battle it against each other. On the majority side, you would have J.H. Owusu Champon, and then on the minority side, the venerable J.H. Mensah battling it out. Of course, he had support from deputy minority leader Gladys Asma, with the majority chief whip being Richard Donu Nate, and minority chief whip S.K. Boafo. Of course, later in time, there were some reshuffles in 1998. For those of you who are not very familiar with leadership reshuffles, it didn't start today. In 1998, majority chief whip Edward Doajaho came to replace as majority chief whip. First majority chief whip Comfort Owusu, second majority chief whip Ni Ajay Boy second, and of course on the minority side, SK Boafo, supported by Sheikh Ibrahim Kujo Kwe, popularly commonly known as IC Kwe. So that was the second parliament of this Fourth Republic. Then came the third parliament, the period between 2001 to 2005. That was the period that we said the Right Honorable Peter Alajete serve as Speaker of Parliament. But he had Freddie Blay, again, as First Deputy Speaker, Ken Drasa as Second Deputy Speaker, Felix Owusu-Agyapong as the Majority Leader, who was later replaced by Papo Owusu-Ankoma. He was supported by A.O. Edu. Minority side, we had the current Speaker of Parliament, Alban Sumana Kingsford Babin, serving as the Minority Leader. He was supported by Isaac Kwejueje Mensah as Deputy Minority, Leader. Chief Whip, then from the majority side, Yao Barima, Deputy Chief Whips from the majority side, the current Majority Leader, Oseche Mensah Bonsu, as well as Moses Daniba, you remember. The minority side had Chief Whip Edward Doa Jao, who later became Speaker of Parliament, supported by John Tia and Comfort Owusu. At some point, there were some reshuffles. Oseche Mensah Bonsu became Majority Chief Whip. K. Okechre became first Majority Chief Whip. Gifty Eugenia Kusi became second Deputy Majority Chief Whip, with the minority side having Comfort Owusu and John Tia. And this was the third Parliament of the Fourth Republic. Then came the fourth Parliament of the Fourth Republic, the Parliament that Honorable Yusuf Hussein eventually joined. And this had the Right Honorable Virginia Sechi Hughes as Speaker of Parliament, having defeated Right Honorable Peter Alajete when members of Parliament voted. I recall that was the engagement that piqued my interest in parliamentary work. As a young student, I sat behind the TV watching GBC and seeing how the elections of the elections between Peter Alajete and Virginia Sechi Hughes took place, and I was excited about the process. I enjoyed it very, very much. He was supported. We had Freddie Blay, First Deputy Speaker. We had Malik Yakubu, Second Deputy Speaker. Majority Leader was Felix Owusu-Agyapong, supported by A.O. Edu. Minority Leader, I think, S.K. Babin, Doa Jao was his deputy. Mensah Bonsu was Majority Chief Whip. John Akologo Tia as Minority Chief Whip. And on the majority and minority side, they were supported by their Deputy Chief Whips until there were some reshuffles along the way. So these are the first four parliaments of the Fourth Republic. Now the fifth parliament. Now, by the time of the fifth parliament, Honorable Yusuf Hussein, you were now a full member of parliament. And by full, I mean you started and ended it, unlike the fourth parliament where you joined midstream. In this fifth parliament, which commenced in January of 2009, your speaker was the first female speaker, Justice Bamford Addo. What are your take on the first and only female we've had in that seat as speaker?
So let's roll back briefly to the fourth parliament. A very important convention was established in the fourth parliament. When the NDC put up the Peter Alajete as their preferred candidate for speaker, the majority side made it clear to the minority that in the case that the Peter Alajete is not elected Speaker of Parliament, NDC will lose the position of second Deputy Speaker. By convention, the second Deputy Speaker goes to the opposition. So that is why in the fourth Parliament, after the NDC put up Peter Alajete and lost the contest to Sechi Beji Hughes, Ken Girasa then lost his position as second Deputy Speaker.
Good point. And so the CPP's Freddie Blay, who was with the majority side or doing business with the majority side, became the second Deputy Speaker, which meant that Speaker from the NPP side, First Deputy Speaker, and Second Deputy Speaker from the majority side. The NDC minority had zero in that top leadership of that Fourth Republican Parliament. Thanks for bringing that convention. Interesting point.
That convention again was repeated in the eighth Parliament.
Eighth Parliament, indeed. Yes. So the fourth Parliament, the eighth Parliament, And look at it, it's the intervals of 4. So maybe the 12th parliament may also have
So,
a situation
so
like
you
that.
can see clearly that Parliament was now in the business of building conventions as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And these conventions are so necessary because Parliament is about rules, it's about conventions, it's about practices, that makes it, a very, very strong parliament. So back to the question on Justice Banforado, first female speaker.
Justice Banforado was a mother. She was a justice of the Supreme Court. Justice Banforado clearly was not a politician. And so she listened. She listened to the leadership and conducted Parliament in such a way that there was not much controversy surrounding her decisions. Not much controversy. I mean, that's why Banforado, many people are prone to forgetting that she was once upon a time a speaker. Because you wouldn't find in that period a lot of controversy surrounding the decisions of Banforado because she listened. She listened a lot to leadership. She was willing to learn and bring her experience as a judge of the Superior Court of Judicature to bear on Parliament. And she understood the remits of democracy and what ought to be done to consolidate our democracy. She was a fine speaker.
In the female speaker you've described as the mother of the house, and of course, I'll need your thoughts on whether you think that we need more female speakers, of Parliament going forward. While you answer that, I would also want to pick your thoughts on how that first engagement between the two friends, Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin as majority leader, Chimenza Bonsu as minority leader, kicked off in that Parliament of 2009 to 2013. Ghanaians have known these two names as, an inseparable pair, yet, embroiled with a lot of controversy sometimes, about whether they are truly, at each other's throats, or this is just, how the work comes to play out. So your thoughts on female speakers going forward, and then, of course, in that Parliament, when you had started and ended with them, with, of course, nobody from the minority side in the speakership, what were your thoughts about the roles that Chimenza Bonsu and Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin played as leaders of the House?
Well, I think that the relationship between Chimenza Bonsu and Right Honorable Speaker as a minority leader developed when Chimenza Bonsu became the whip. And so he was entitled to some rapport between the leadership of the minority in Parliament, because the whips play a lot of backroom negotiations and consultations with the leaders of the House, and I'm sure that was when I believe that's when the relationship started. Because in the fourth Parliament, when Chimenza Bonsu was a deputy, I didn't see much of that relationship. But the leadership actually started when Chimenza Bonsu could stand up in Parliament as whip and debate Honorable Bagbin as minority leader. And then they were always trying to show their class, and outside the chamber they would meet and then and review what they did in Parliament, and then they developed some fondness for each other. I think that's how it developed.
And viewers, you are watching the People's Parliament, brought to you by Parliamentary Network Africa. You can watch the People's Parliament live on Facebook at Parliamentary Network Africa, on YouTube, Parliamentary Network Africa, and of course, you can follow us and join the conversation via Twitter at PN Africa Watch. The People's Parliament is a parliamentary accountability broadcast brought to you every Monday, at 4 p.m., where we hold the institution of Parliament accountable, and we also provide public education on Parliament, how it works, and how the citizens can make the most out of it. I've been here with Honorable Inusa Fuseni, a former member of parliament, served in 4 different parliaments from 2006 to 2021, a lawyer par excellence, and he's been sharing some amazing insights on how his experiences with parliaments, the ones he was a part of, and even the ones that he was not a part of. On the phone lines, though, is Mr. Stephen Kweye. Stephen was a parliamentary reporter for the GBC for a long while. He's going to join us on phone to share a few thoughts. Stephen, if you can hear us, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Hello.
Yes, Stephen, we can hear you. Welcome to the show.
Yes, I represented GBC in Parliament around 2005, and I enjoyed working in the House. The leadership at that time did very well to steer the affairs of the country very, very well to a democratic path. And like one of the contributors was saying, that there was a cordial relationship between the then majority leader and then the minority leader, who is now the Speaker of the House, as Right Honorable Alban Babia and Honorable Osechi Mensah. They were both, in fact, they did not play to the gallery, but they were in for business. But outside the house, you could see them talking together, exchanging pleasantries, and the parliament was still maybe the backbone of the republic, because debates that took place were interesting debates here and there, and members contributed very, very well. And so that the Right Honorable Speaker, Banfu Addo, did very, very well. As somebody remarked that he was non-partisan, and every decision he gave was in the best interest of the country, and the nation moved on very well. So I think present day members will emulate them and place the interest of the country first before any partisan consideration. And now you could see, well, current speaker is also doing very well at the moment. And I think with this balanced ideas, he is also proving his mettle and just copying what the Right Honorable Banfu Addo also did. So, well, Ghana's parliament will go a long way, maybe to bring about what Ghanaians require. But my only concern is that at times you be in the house because of this hybrid type of parliament that we have now. You will find some few people, because many of them have been made ministers, and when it comes to debating a very important motion, you find only a few members right in the house, right in the chamber. So this is what maybe
Stephen,
I have to say.
and on that point that you made, let me check with you on this so that we can, of course, say thank you to you. As a journalist, you know, one that has served very well in covering Parliament, what do you think can be some of the things that journalists now working in Parliament can do better with, especially in ensuring that the institution of Parliament is held accountable, the institution of Parliament becomes better, and the institution of Parliament is portrayed as one that is working for the common interest of the people of Ghana? Your own colleagues, journalists, what are some of the key, attributes, qualities, thoughts you would like to share with them as an experienced journalist yourself?
Well, unfortunately, the line is not audible enough for me to listen to whatever you are saying. But from what I heard from you as journalists, during our time, we made sure that our people were in good shape, and therefore, though there was a committee among the press corps, there was a committee of which I was the chairman, with Mr. Du Jamra and others as members. We made sure that our members were disciplined, that anybody at all who entered the house, we served as gatekeepers. We made sure that nobody from outside could infiltrate our ranks, and therefore, by the courtesy of our then leader, whom we call Dean as Atta, we were able to organize so many workshops for our members to improve on their skills. And that helped in a long way by just churning out good news, sending out good reportage from Parliament House. Because at certain times, leadership would draw our attention to some lapses. And we were able to address those lapses through workshops. And I think such workshops be organized for our men, the journalists in Parliament, because they are the eyes and ears of the nation. Whatever that comes out of the place is taken as the gospel truth. Therefore, our members should be abreast of time, And what we also checked during our period was that our members respected themselves. Because as a journalist, it's the cardinal point. One of the cardinal points is that you must respect yourself. If you respect yourself, members of the house will also respect you. But when at times, due to financial difficulties, most of us would follow the MPs. We follow them for, say, monetary considerations, said that nobody will respect you if on two occasions, you go to an MP to solicit money. Then the next time, the person, it was one thing my colleagues could bear witness that I refrained from. And I had the support and respect of members in the house. Up till this time, some of the old members called to find out how, even though on retirement. So if you comport yourself very well, everybody will respect you. So I urge leadership to organize many workshops for our members to improve on their skills. This is what I have for now.
Very well. Stephen Quaye is a former parliamentary reporter for the GBC. Stephen has actually highlighted the very important aspect of capacity building for members of the Parliamentary Press Corps as an important aspect of ensuring that they can live up to their mandate of bringing quality parliamentary information to the public, and also ensuring that they have they carry themselves properly, so members of parliament can respect them and deal with them as journalists who are performing a very important role. Stephen, thank you so very much for joining us. Stephen Quaye is a former parliamentary reporter for GBC Radio who had joined us. Recall that we have also been with Honorable Yunus Afuseni, who's been sharing some thoughts on Parliament. We're going to go for a quick break. When we come back, we left off at the level of the 6th Parliament. We will continue with the 7th and 8th Parliament. And then, of course, we'll bring you issues of what happened in Parliament last week and what we expect from Parliament going into the current week. A quick commercial break. We'll be back shortly. Where we are going to have last week in Parliament. What happened last week in Parliament? And then, of course, we'll do a preview of this week in Parliament. We have to join us in doing this, the communications officer from Parliamentary Network Africa, who doubles up as a parliamentary reporter. Clement Akolo will be joining us to give us a review of what happened last week in Parliament, as well as a preview of what is expected this week in Parliament. Clement, welcome. And how did last week go in Parliament?
Thank you very much. Last week was interesting. I mean, top on the issue was the presentation by the Minister for Finance with regards to the DDET, that is the domestic debt exchange program. It was the highlight of last week in Parliament. But on Tuesday, February 14th, 2023, the Right Honourable Speaker, Alban Bagbin, informed the House that upon the advice of the Committee on the 30th anniversary of parliamentary democracy, the launch of the anniversary will take place on Wednesday, 22nd February 2023 at 9 a.m. in the Parliamentary Chamber, instead of the advertised Justice Annan Conference Center. And how coincidentally today, topic for discussion is about this very important celebration of Ghana's parliamentary democracy. He also drew the House's attention to the observation of the 14th February as National Chocolate Day and entreated members of Parliament to observe it as such. And this event was observed in Parliament with the usual chocolate festival and sharing of chocolate, as well as around the whole country. And there came some questions as well. The minister responsible for communication and digitalization, Mrs. Ursula Gifty-Owusu Ekuful, appeared before the House to respond to some 7 questions filed by members of Parliament concerning her ministry. When it came to statements, the Honourable Member for Efutu and Deputy Majority Leader, Mr. Alexander Kwamina Afenyo-Markin, made a statement on the hepatitis B disease and called for more public education and enrollment of same on the National Health Insurance Scheme to help save lives. There was a second statement by Honourable Member for South Dai, Mr. Roxin Nelson Eche Kwame Dafiamepo, made a statement on the celebration of the World Radio Day, which fell on the 13th day of February. And then there was a third statement. The Honourable Member for Ofinso South, Dr. Isaac Yao-Opoku, made a statement on the celebration of the National Chocolate Day, which falls on the 14th day of February each year. There was withdrawal of a bill. The Honourable Minister responsible for lands, natural resources, Mr. Samuel Abdullahi Jinapo, by leave of the House, withdrew the Wildlife Resources Management Bill 2022, which was presented and read the first time on 3rd March 2022. The Honourable First Deputy Speaker, who was sitting in the chair, accordingly withdrew the referral to the Committee on Lands and Forestry. There was also a presentation of bills, and the following bills were presented and read the first time. That's by Honorable Minister responsible for Lands and Natural Resources, Mr. Abdullahi Jinapo, Wildlife Resources Management Bill 2022. And Wildlife Resources Management Bill 2022, First Deputy Speaker referred the bill to the Committee on Lands and Forestry for consideration and reports. And then also, Honorable Minister responsible for Health, Mr. Kweku Agyeman-Manu, on behalf of the Minister responsible for Finance, also presented standard for automatic exchange for financial account information Amendment Bill 2022. This also was referred to the Finance Committee for consideration. And then finally, on Tuesday, we had the National Vaccine Institute Bill 2022 duly read the third time and passed. So on Tuesday, these were the things that happened. Now on Wednesday, 15 February 2023, the Honorable Minister responsible for Sanitation and Water Resources, Mrs. Cecilia Abnadapa, appeared in the House to give answers to some 10 questions filed by MPs. On statement, the Honorable Member for Damango and Acting Minister for Trade and Industry, Mr. Samuel Abdullahi Jinapo, made a policy statement government to protect consumers. Presentation of papers. The Honorable Member for Bekwai and First Deputy Speaker, Mr. Joseph Osei Wusu, on behalf of the Right Honorable Speaker and Chairman of the Committee, presented the report of the Committee on Selection on the recomposition of committees. The House accordingly approved the report of the Committee of Selection on the recomposition of committees, including the Standing Orders Committee, the Business Commitments Committee, the Special Budget Committee, the Judiciary Committee, the Committee of Selection, the Committee of Privileges, and the Committee of Environment, Science, and not the Wednesday, what happened in Parliament. Now, on Thursday, the Honorable Speaker read a communication from His Excellency the President informing the Speaker and the House of his absence from the country from Thursday, 16 February 2023 to Munich, Germany, at the invitation of the Chairman of the Munich Security Conference, Ambassador Dr. Christoph Husjin, to participate in a session of the Munich Security Conference scheduled from Friday 17th to Sunday 19 February 2023. The communication further indicated that His Excellency the President will depart for Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in the evening of Friday 17 February 2023 to lead Ghana's delegation to the 36th ordinary session government of the African Union and return to Ghana in the evening of Sunday, 19 February 2023. Recognition of senior citizens. The Right Honorable Speaker recognized the public gallery presence of some pensioners and senior citizens who had come to witness the day's proceedings. And you know, Thursday was the day that the Finance Minister had come to do a presentation on the domestic debt exchange. And those who were interested, including the pensioners and senior citizens, were present. So the Speaker took the opportunity to recognize them whilst they were sitting in the gallery. And also the Speaker had the occasion to also introduce an official delegation from Committee on Legal Affairs of the German Parliament, who were in the country on an official visit. Then finally, Mr. Ken Ukam, to be implemented by the government. the Right Honorable Speaker, having regard to the statement, referred the statement to the Finance Committee for further look into the issues that the Finance Minister had spoken about, because members of Parliament, especially from the minority side, had given notice that they were going to further pursue the issue that the Finance Minister was talking about, because they were not very satisfied with what the Finance Minister had come to present to them. And then finally, on Friday, there were a couple of questions that were put to the Minister for Roads and Highways. It has become a ritual that every Friday it is actually reserved for the Minister for Roads and Highways to come and give some answers to some parliamentary questions filed by members of Parliament with regards to the state of roads in their constituencies. So there were some 10 questions that were filed, and the minister came to respond to them. There wasn't any statements on that day, and there was rather a motion that this Honorable House adopts the report of the committee composed to advise the Speaker on the appointment of other members of Parliament, Parliamentary Service Board. And there was a committee formed. That committee was adopted by the House, and they are supposed to advise the Speaker on how to recompose the Parliamentary Service Board. And these members included Honorable Oseiche Mensah Bosu, Honorable Dr. Kessel Atu Banforsen, Honorable Alexander Kwamna Afenyo-Markin, and Honorable Emmanuel Ama Kofi Boa. So this, in short, is what happened last week in Parliament. And so if you ask me, Honorable Sami, this is where I will leave it.
I'm not too sure that the honorable title is befitting my status. Thank you very much, Clement. So just like it was indicated to you in our last week's broadcast, we had, the communications minister, the roads minister, the sanitation and water resources minister, all appearing before Parliament to answer many parliamentary questions which bordered on constituencies, their road, their water situation, their telephony situation, and what have you. And of course, Clement indicated that some of the major highlights were the finance minister coming to talk about the domestic debt exchange program, which has been referred to the finance committee to look into it and come back to plenary on that. There was also matters related to the recomposition of committees, because the minority side have new leadership, and so that will have to change the composition of committees in Parliament. And of course, the Parliamentary Service Board would also have to recompose, because there are new leaders from the minority side who needs to join. This week in Parliament may see a few other things. Clement had already given us indication that the 30th anniversary of Parliament, will be launched sometime this week. Apart from that, there will be some questions. Health Minister will come to answer some questions. Transport Minister will answer questions. Lands and Natural Resources Minister will answer questions. Education Minister will answer questions. And of course, Roads Minister. The roads are still issues in this our country, and so Roads Minister will come and answer questions as Parliament also goes about the issue of legislation oversight and what have you. There may be a few committees that will meet in Parliament, but Parliament is preparing to welcome the President on the 28th of February for the State of the Nation address. And so we'll look forward to that State of the Nation address and see how that one goes when the time is due. And so to you, our cherished viewers, we are happy that you were able to join us for this week's episode of the People's Parliament. Recall that we would certainly be bringing you, bits and pieces about what happens in Parliament and opportunities to engage as citizens. Today, we've been looking at 30 years of the Fourth Republican Parliament. The first 6 parliaments came under real scrutiny, but we'll be taking a better look at the 8th Parliament, how different it is, what it has to offer, whether it has lived up to expectation in another episode of our broadcast. Our time slot for today is up, and this is where we'll bid you bye-bye, and thank you so very much for joining us. Remember that you can always join the People's Parliament broadcast every Monday, 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Live on YouTube, Parliamentary Network Africa, on Facebook, Parliamentary Network Africa, and of course, you can be interactive with us at PN Africa Watch on Twitter, #People's Parliament. My name is Sami Obin. Thank you so very much for joining us. We are also very grateful to Honorable Yunus Hussein, who will be bringing back to share perspective about this 8th Parliament. We had so much expectation of the 8th Parliament. Have they lived up to expectation? Are they proving to become the worst parliaments in the 30 years history of our parliamentary democracy, or would they be the best? What do they have to offer for the second 2 years of their mandates? Do join us next week at 4 p.m. Live on Facebook, live on YouTube. Thank you to the production team here at Parliamentary Network Africa for helping to bring this production. We are very grateful to you, and we are happy that you are also able to join us from wherever it is that you connected with us. Please enjoy your evening, and of course, let's help put Ghana first. Good night.